with math with RHB, and we're continuing subtraction of fractions, which is actually lesson 34. And this is part 2 of 34. I split it into 2 because of the complexity of some of the questions in subtraction. So we're going to take a look at why they're complex and then a couple of examples. So I'm going to turn on the overhead, get that bright flash of light. This is lesson 2 or part 2, and we're talking about borrowing. This is where, again, it gets that complexity. When subtracting mixed fractions, you might have to borrow 1 from the top whole number. Now, what does that mean, borrow 1? All right, you're actually going to change the 1 that you've borrowed to the fraction form of 1. And we talked about that back in lesson, I think it was 29, fraction form of 1. So we have 3 over 3, 4 over 4, 5 over 5, any possibility, 25 over 25, fraction form of 1. Now, this is the sticky part. Be sure, whatever you use, make sure that it's the form of the common denominator that's already in the question. Don't pick some other fraction form of 1 and then add to the complexity. So we're looking at example 3 1/4 minus 1 3/4. Well, we have a common denominator. We have a 4, we have a 4. Well, I can subtract 1 from 3, but I can't subtract 3 from 1. So now I have a problem. I'm going to have to borrow from this 3, make it a fraction form of 1. In this case, I'm going to use 4 over 4 because my denominator is 4, and change the question. So it's going to look now, I'm going to borrow from the 3, it will now become 2, and this will end up being 1/4 that we already have, plus my fraction form of 1. So I actually end up with 2 and 5 over 4. And the bottom number is going to stay the same. We have the same denominator. We don't have to do anything fancy with it. We just have to rewrite it. Subtract 1 3/4. Underneath, 2 take away 1 gives me 1. 5 take away 3 gives me 2. My common denominator is 4. And then all I have to do is reduce that fraction. 2 will go into 2 once. 2 will go into 4 twice. So I end up with 1 1/2. We give another example. Push this up a little bit. Just checking to make sure it's on the screen or you can't see it. And it's not very dark. Darken it a little. 4 and a 6. Subtract 3 and 2/3. So we need a common denominator. We don't have one. So we need to start with that operation. So I'm going to keep the 4, the whole number. I'm going to keep the 6 because 3 will go into 6, 6 will go into 6. So I end up with subtract 3, and if I end up with a 6 here, I multiply 3 times 2 to get 6, so I have to multiply 2 times 2, and that will give me 4. My only problem is I can take 3 from 4, but I can't take 4 from 1. So I'm going to have to borrow. Again, we're going to change the question. So 3, that's going to become a 3. The fraction form of 1 that I'm going to borrow for this question is going to be 6 over 6. So it's going to look like this. 1/6 plus 6 over 6. And again, I'm going to end up with 3 and 7 over 6. This just gets written. Subtract 3 and 4 over 6. printing's not very good. So 3 take away 3 gives me nothing, so I don't have to write anything. 7 take away 4 is 3 over 6. And I can reduce that. 3 will divide into 3 once. 3 will divide into 6 twice. So my final answer is a half. Now take a look at 2 more questions. One's from the other sheet that we didn't finish in the last part. So I have 7/9 subtract 2/5. Make sure I'm on the screen here. 7/9 subtract 2/5. Don't have a common denominator, can't subtract. Have to change that. Subtract 45. So 9 times 5 gave me 45. 7 times 5 will give me 35. 5 times 9 gave me 45, so 2 times 9 gives me 18. 35, so 45 is going to be my common denominator. 35 subtract 18 is going to give me 17. I can't reduce 17/45 any lower, it's a weird number, but that is the final answer. Final one, we have a little bit of a, I'm going to make sure I'm on the screen again. No, I'm over too far. My hand's in the way. 6 2/5 minus 5 4/9. So I'm going to switch them. 5 and 9, we know up here we use 45, so 45 works here, that's great. The only problem is, once I've converted them again, I have 18, 5 take away, or sorry, 6 take away 5 I can do, 18 take away 20 I can't really do. So it has to be totally redone. So I'm going to borrow from the 6 and it's going to become a 5. Now the fraction form that I'm going to put together in this case is going to be 18/45 plus 45 over 45. Right. How many 45s can I get out of 45? I can get 1. So I'm still looking at my fraction form of 1. And we're going to subtract 5 and 20 45ths. I'm going to go down lower again. Excuse me. We have 5 and 18 plus 45 is 63 45ths. Subtract 5 and 20 45ths, which equals 5 take away 5 is nothing, so I don't have to worry about that. 63 take away 20 is 43 over 45. That's my final answer. Much more complex. The nice thing about seeing this on YouTube or however is you can stop the video, replay the video, check out the numbers again, and check to see how it's done. Right? Much more complex. Multiplying and dividing fractions are much simpler operations.